Do you know what my karaoke song is? I don't think we've ever gone karaokeing together.
No, we haven't, but I can only assume that's Fire in the Sky.
Pretty close.
Deep Purple.
It's Sweet Child of Mine.
Oh.
That are some of the early Whitney Houston ballads. This time we watch Season 3, Episode 3, Pod People.
In which the most alien thing is man's inhumanity to man.
I don't know, that seems awfully familiar these days, but first, we had another night with the Mads.
Yes, we were watching the Mads riff Wyatt Ordung's Walk the Dark Street.
Is that Robot Monster's own Wyatt Ordung?
The very same.
Well, we all loved a Robot Monster. This must have been just as good a movie. Plus, the last two movies that the Mads did were just great. The Tingler and Glen or Glenda, classic underrated movies. I can only imagine all signs point to Walk the Dark Street being just a hidden gem.
Yeah, you'd think that, but it turns out it was the most tedious thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, it's really tedious.
I mean, the riff was good. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, exactly. They did a good job with it under dire circumstances. But wow, that movie was hard to sit through, even with delightful riffing.
Yeah, I felt like I was trapped in the film after a while because it's like, it's got about 12 minutes of plot, but it goes on for at least 79 minutes.
Yeah, it's a real nothing burger of a movie. I guess there's a rich man who wants to play the most dangerous game. I think that was what the plot was, but it was like watching paint dry.
It was hard watching, especially surprising given that it's like, oh, it's a young Chuck Connors, but man, even he couldn't save this thing.
What has Chuck Connors saved?
Well, he briefly saved a movie called Summer Camp Nightmare, in which rowdy teens take over a camp. It's not a comedy.
I guess I had more faith in Wyatt Ordung's skills, but still.
Yeah, you know, after the wildly entertaining Robot Monster, low on budget but high on imagination, you would think that this was a real inventive director, but no, I guess he only had one hit in him.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen his other films, but certainly he didn't have this as a hit in him.
No.
What is the next thing that they're going to be doing?
Well, luckily for us, they are, and for the world, they are going to be riffing a whole night of spooky shorts. Well, possibly spooky, but spooky or otherwise shorts.
It'll be just before Halloween, so I sure hope at least there's a little spooky spooks.
Yeah, or at the very least, some kind of nice Halloween bumpers to go along with them.
Yeah, or maybe Frank dresses his cats up in costume, something like that.
Yes, I'm sure they'll respond very well to that.
Yeah, no, this is a thing that I was hoping they would do, and they're going to do it, and I couldn't be more excited.
Yeah, it's something that we were really hurting for the revival of the show. It's like, where are the shorts? Where are the shorts? I demand shorts! And we didn't get any shorts. But luckily, Trace and Frank have graced us, or are about to grace us, with a whole night of them, which sounds like a lot of fun. And I think they've done these live as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes. At least they've done shorts live before. Because if you're carrying your ass all the way out to go see them live, well, you might as well get more than the 60 minutes of a Wyatt Ordung feature.
Yes, ideally.
So, yes. I don't know whether they're all going to be the same ones, but I assume so. I mean, maybe they'll have something new. Who knows?
Yeah. It could be anything, which is always part of the delight of watching these Frank and Trace nights. They're really great.
And they had Jonah on as a guest this time.
Yeah, and that was a lot of fun too.
Yeah, and they had the daughter of Vincent Price the last time. So I wonder if they'll find another person to have on for their shorts collection.
Yes, the ghost of Shorts Must Past.
Who knows? I can't wait to find out. Anyway, we'll have links in the show notes for those of you who somehow don't know already how to get tickets. But, go to our show notes, go and check the links, and we'll see you there.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, because of scheduling whoopsies, we are recording this quite at the end of September, which is not really when we meant to be recording this. And it's probably going to be released more or less on the final day of September. I don't know. I don't. You listener. But that means that we're probably not going to get our next episode out on the traditional early October day for our episode, which is to say Donald Pleasance Day.
Yes, the most important day of the year has to sadly go without celebration, potentially. We've covered all the Donald Pleasance content, not just on the Donald Pleasance days, but Chris, we had that special episode in which you talked about Circus of Fear.
Yes.
So we've got all of that covered. We've covered the major points of Pleasance, and this would be more a nice aperitif after the main course. So we're going to continue things with stuff that is tangentially Donald Pleasance related for releases around that time, but they may or may not come out on the day, depending on scheduling.
Depending on things, but we wanted to let you know right now so that you don't forget October 5th, celebrate Donald Pleasance Day in your heart of hearts. And I'm sure we'll figure out some way to celebrate it on the Twitters or something. It'll be a big blast. But yeah, we might have some Donald Pleasance facts in our next episode. So stay tuned for that, even if it will be after the day. Why, there's no bad day to celebrate Donald Pleasance.
Every day is Donald Pleasance Day in the hearts of children everywhere.
And speaking of children everywhere, we should turn to the child in today's movie, Pod People.
If we must. This time we watch Season 3, Episode 3, Pod People. Now let's try to make sense of this confusing mess, shall we? A group of poachers are out in the wilderness when a meteor crashes to Earth, containing a monster and its young. So, does the film show poachers grabbing the egg and getting picked off one by some unseen creature? No. Cue the music. Elsewhere in the movie is a successful band. Well, successful, I'm not so sure, but let's go with that. And it's run by some jerk with a perm. Things aren't going well, and the crew decide to take up camping. Now, curiously, the jerky lead singer has invited a dim groupie along with his girlfriend to go on the camping trip. 2 girls. Wow. Oh, I get it now. It's not a horror movie. Aliens, camping, teens. Don't you see? This is Meatballs 2. This is a wacky sex romp, and the Pod People title is a sly commentary on the music industry. This isn't going to be a horror movie at all, right? Well, maybe it is. You see, in yet another subplot, young Tommy is a rural boy who collects all sorts of insects and animals, much to the frustration of his parents. One day, Tommy comes across an egg that's almost as big as he is, and the young lad absconds with it. When it hatches in his bedroom, out comes a creature whose head possesses a huge trunk and little Barney Rubble eyes, while the rest of its body looks like an ape suit. The creature, whom Tommy names Trumpy, shows off his magical powers by making the little boy's room come to life with dancing chairs and clothes. It's kind of a charming stop-motion effect, actually. So, is this the movie we're in? It's like a kid's film where Tommy will meet up with the band in the woods, yeah, but he'll lose Trumpy to the perm-haired jerk singer, and Trumpy will become the band's mascot. But meanwhile, the poachers are hunting Trumpy with hilarious hijinks until Trumpy is reunited with its mother, I guess. Right? Wrong again, Adam. Rather than choosing a genre, the movie just lurches awkwardly between horror, teen romp, and kids' film at any given moment. Who is this for? Anyhow, the groupie is the first to go after taking a tumble in the woods. Oh, and she makes contact with the mother alien who gives the corpse glowing dots on her forehead. Anywho, not much else happens by the time the band makes its way to Tommy's house in the hopes of saving the groupie. Characters are killed by Trumpy's mother until Tommy takes Trumpy into the woods, and, in a scene oft compared to Old Yeller, Tommy badmouths the young alien until it trudges deep within the woods, never to be seen again. Oh, and Trumpy probably starves to death, since the human he imprinted on abandoned him, and the only other member of its species is shot by that guy with the perm. The end.
Meanwhile, on the satellite of love, during the late 80s and early 90s, one-man and one-woman shows were very popular in certain circles, and so, of course, when it's time for the Satellite of Love's Art Chautauqua, the bots will present their one-bot shows. Crow's cynical look at the world is called Robot on the Run. Tom's autobiographical piece gives lots of moments for melodrama. For the Invention Exchange, Joel's invented a new guitar chord that takes 2 people to play. It goes over with a bang. The Mads invent a karaoke machine that's filled with public domain tunes like the immortal Baba Black Sheep. The Mads sing a version of Ave Maria that wouldn't be matched until Paul Anka sang it in Girlstown. The first intermission recreates the scene in the studio as Joel sings Idiot Control Now with the bots singing backup and the Mads in the recording booth. Frank wears that iconic I'm a Virgin t-shirt, and it's great. The halftime show has Joel building a wall of keyboards on the deck of the Satellite of Love. He teaches Crow how to hold a chord down for an hour and get a record deal with Windham Hill. Tom steps in to do the NPR-style voiceover for the show.
And now, music from some guys in space.
The third intermission recreates the Trumpy You Can Do Magic Things scene, and everything flies around the satellite. The Mads look on, concerned. And after the movie, we end with Joel packing things up, for some reason, which leads him to break out into a very sweet song.
Tell me, where is that cloud in the sky for me? Oh.
The Mads' response to this music?
It stinks.
Hey, what a great episode.
This, of course, as I've mentioned, I think a few hundred times now, but this, of course, was the first episode that everybody was talking about. Before there was a Manos, the Hands of Fate, before there was a Puma Man, before there was that Canadian one, Final Sacrifice, this was the episode that everyone talked about. And this was the gateway episode that was well recommended as of middle of season 3 into season 4.
And it was kind of my gateway episode, so to speak, in that it's the first episode I saw, because, I mean, I saw MST3K, the movie first, but this is the first one I picked up on VHS. This is one of the first episodes released by Rhino, and I completely fell in love with it.
Yeah, that's another part of it, is that this is an early VHS release, and then on, I believe, the second collection of DVDs, when they started putting them out on DVD, it's clearly an important one in the lore. I haven't watched it in a long time. And while there's a lot in this episode that I love, I think the episode's kind of boring for most of it.
See, I would disagree. I think the riffing is really strong in the first half, and there's lots of them to play with, and especially the terrible, terrible song, which is so iconic that it becomes an entire host segment. There's a lot of weird, goofy stuff with Trumpy, and it is, like, the film itself is fascinating as an experiment, because you are left with, what is this?
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. Like, I'm glad they did it. I'm glad to have watched it. I'm glad. And they did a pretty good job with it. But it's actually a really unusual episode, I think, because there are two key scenes, right? There's a scene in the recording studio, and there's the Trumpy You Can Do Magic Things scene, where everything's flying around this kid's bedroom. And maybe also sort of very close to the flying around the bedroom scene is the potato sequence when Trumpy wanders around and it's Crow, right? Crow says everything. Oh, there's another potato. Oh,
Yes.
Fantastic sequences. And it's one of the unusual MST3K episodes that has a really strong movie segment at the 1 hour mark, at the halfway mark, right? Usually there's like a fantastic beginning, a fantastic ending, but middles are not as easy to riff because you're not being introduced to a ton of weird things all at once. There's sort of a lot of plot happening and you kind of focus on that for a bit. Mm-hmm. And so middles of MST3K episodes just tend to be a bit saggy or a bit, a bit of a dry spell. This, on the other hand, has one of its best sequences exactly at the hour mark, which I think is interesting just in terms of thinking about it being on TV and thinking about people switching over to Comedy Central or the Comedy Channel, whatever it was at this point, and flipping it on at 9 o'clock, let's say, if it started at 8, flipping over at 9 o'clock and catching that sequence, like primed to see one of the best sequences of the show. Right then. It's a good grab in the middle of an episode, and that'll keep you in for the rest of it.
Yeah, completely. Like I said, I think there's a lot to offer here. I think it's a really good episode, honestly. And I think one of the reasons why it's so singed in my brain is that the host segments are among the best that the series has ever produced, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't necessarily need the Trumpy You Can Do Magic Things sketch, but the rest of them are fantastic.
Oh, I kind of love it because there is the joy of seeing Tom Servo dressed up as Trumpy,
sure,
floating around, which is pretty fun, and Joel saying, "I don't know how it works." Like, it earned it for me. It earned it for me.
Sure. I don't know. There are long stretches where this movie is just impenetrable, and that is kind of pleasurable in some ways, but it's also, I find it sometimes a difficult watch, especially compared with some of the other things that MST3K offers.
Yeah, I'll always have a soft spot for it. It's one of the things that made me such a big fan of the Joel era. This is kind of like a perfect example of how it has a Pee-wee's Playhouse vibe. And like I said, I think a lot of the riffs are really good, and they pick apart the movie kind of perfectly with the many, many, many subplots that are in it and the discussions of same.
Yeah, that's a part that I really loved about it was when they finally were breaking down, okay, this is plot A, this is plot B, are we back at plot D? Like, Tom has a real breakdown trying to parse the movie in the middle of the movie.
Mhm.
And I always love it when they get directly into that kind of analysis and making, they do it in a funny way, but they're analyzing what's going on in the movie. They're really helping you see if somehow you can't see it because, like me, you were, 14, 15 when this episode first aired, and you aren't that media literate yet. They're telling you, here's a problem. There's too many plots. None of them have anything to do with each other. They're ramming into each other. We're cutting from one to another real quick. And like, to me, that seems obvious now, but at the time, that was how I learned about such things. So I will always appreciate this for that.
Yes, so I would say, it's a great first episode because it worked for me. And sure enough, this was when they did that top 100 MST3Ks for the Kickstarter. I believe this was number 5.
Yeah, that seems crazy high to me, but that's okay. People can like it. I don't want to tell people not to like it if they like it.
Yeah, it's a very special episode for many. Oh man. So Chris, do you ever have those moments where essentially MST3K is also your first taste of the work of a deeply terrible film director?
I mean, usually, yeah.
But has it often inspired you to go like hunting for their other films?
It would, obviously, because I first would have encountered him on MST3K, pretty sure. And I definitely went and found more of his stuff. I don't know if I've gone too much farther than that. There wasn't any more Coleman Francis to discover. So, but no, this one did not inspire me to go check out more work by this director, whoever he was. I didn't even pay attention to that back in the day.
Ah, well, that is the work of Spanish director Juan Piquer Simón. Yeah, I ended up watching over the course of my life 3 of his other movies: Cthulhu Mansion, Pieces, and Slugs. And we'll talk a little bit about all of those. Cthulhu Mansion, I think the most important thing about it is that it stars Shatner.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
No, I mean Melanie Shatner, his daughter.
What? He has a daughter?
Yeah, he's got at least one.
Does Melanie Shatner's acting chops live up to her parent?
Hell no.
Oh dear.
Yeah, talent does not run in the family, sadly. But it was cool seeing the name Shatner on a Juan Piquer Simón project. But you know what? It's kind of a dull movie and much duller than Pod People.
Because there's only one plot?
There is only one plot, really, but or at least it's a lot less disjointed. That just involves some teens going to a creepy mansion where a guy has tried to resurrect his late wife, but ends up calling up not Cthulhu, but his President's Choice equivalent.
Okay. All right, so that was Cthulhu House, was it?
Cthulhu Mansion. Cthulhu House is the reality show in which 5 Cthulhus have to spend some time in a house without annoying each other or causing the end of the world.
Oh, I would watch that. All right, Cthulhu Mansion. What else did you watch?
Well, there's one. The other one that I watched is Slugs.
That's Squirm. That's just Squirm.
No, it's Slugs, and in fact, it's Slugs the movie. If you watch the movie, there's actually not a colon
the movie,
but there's a subtitle, the movie.
Oh. All right.
Just to let you know that it's not just Slugs the creatures. This is a full motion picture.
Okay. Was it based on a TV show?
No. But it was based on a book. So maybe that's their thinking. I don't know. You've read the book. Now see the movie. Now a major motion picture starring Will Smith. It does not feature Will Smith.
Okay. I assume it's got slugs in it.
It's got slugs. It's got lots of slugs.
Uh-huh.
And it's got the Andy Travis looking guy from this movie, Emilio Linder, and it's also got the Leslie Nielsen looking guy, Frank Branya, in a small role.
Huh. Well, gang's all there.
The Juan Piquer Travel Company.
I mean, they were willing to work for Juan Piquer Simón prices. Why not use them again?
Yes. Slugs has it all. It's got ominous shots of slugs on windows.
Yeah.
It's got a close-up of a man-eating slug puppet that bites somebody's finger.
Uh-huh.
It's got Emilio Linder getting eaten alive by slugs from the inside because he eats one in a salad. This means that again, there's an ominous shot of lettuce
Right.
that has recently been purchased.
This really is sounding a lot like Squirm in the Egg Cream.
It might be. But I will say that there's very little chance that I could live up to the joys of slugs, which has the immortal line, "You don't have the authority to declare happy birthday."
Oh, no.
So that's pretty delightful. Before I get to his magnum opus, which is Pieces, that's his most notorious movie.
Okay.
I found a great quote about his film Mystery of Monster Island.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I did a little look up on this. Now, from the Revenge of the Creature Features guide, they write that it is an ineptly juvenile U.S. Spanish production, allegedly based on an adventure story by Jules Verne, but don't believe it. It's quite a stupid tale in which a young scholar and his elocution teacher are stranded on an island run by prehistoric beasts, which walk upright on two legs, seaweed monsters, steam-blowing worms, and other rubber-suited entities.
That sounds like your cup of tea.
Yep, and sure enough, it's they credit it as being misdirected by J. Piquer Simón. One of the film's stars, Paul Naschy, had this to say about the movie, where an interviewer says, like, "Hey, you had the great opportunity to work with Peter Cushing and Terrence Stamp on that." And Naschy, who is well known for playing a wolfman in a series of movies that he made in Spain, he was basically the Spanish wolfman. And like, these weren't werewolf movies. These were old school Wolfman movies they made in like the 60s and 70s.
Right.
And even, I think, up to the 2000s, he made a Wolfman movie. But anyway, Naschy says, "It was not a really great product. Juan Piquer Simón, the director, well, he is what he is."
That's true. That seems true.
And I gotta say, and this will really come home with Pieces. It's like, what's great about the films of Juan Piquer Simón is that there's this totally weird, like cartoon-like black and white worldview in them. Like, women are simpering fawns or seductresses, and men are burly drunks or seductresses. And there's like no in between. And it's like whenever there's like a really old person in the movie, it's like they might have their hair done up like Flo from the Andy Cap comics.
Oh yes.
And like there's no shades of gray for anybody. You're either like a weathered drunk, a sexy person, or a victim.
I guess I see that in Pod People as well. I mean,
yeah.
Although there's a lot of gray in Pod People because it's a terrible print, and
that's mostly the fog,
and it's all very confusing.
But yes, Pieces not only has Frank Branya in it, the Leslie Nielsen guy, but also has Ian Serra, the It Stinks guy.
Oh, wow!
Yeah.
Does he in fact stink in that film?
No, but he doesn't have a fate worse than death. I'll tell you all about it. Pieces is one of the grisliest and most miserable slasher movies ever.
Oh, goody.
It's extremely gory. I would not recommend it for the faint of stomach.
Nope, I'm passing.
It had two taglines. One was, "You don't have to go to Texas for a chainsaw massacre," but even better was, "Pieces, it's exactly what you think it is."
I mean, I think it would be like an Ingmar Bergman film or something.
Well, if that's what you think it is, check it out. There's definitely a lot of death in it. Now, the movie is, again, it's a grisly, bloody slasher movie, completely unrated. More grisly than its American counterparts for slasher fans. And yet, despite all of this, the movie stops for like a tennis scene. So they're because one of the key ways they try to track down the killer is that they hire a tennis expert to go undercover.
Now, with a name like Pieces, that seems like you could get away with having far too many plot lines. Again, I'm thinking of the Bergman style fractured narrative thing, which I guess is not really what's going on here.
No.
But it only has the one plot line, basically.
Yeah, there's multiple red herrings and the movie doesn't really play fair with who the killer is.
Right. But it doesn't jump from entirely different sets of characters and entirely different genres like Pod People does.
No, that's the thing that's crazy about the Juan Piquer Simón films that I've seen is that they are so linear and so easy to follow, and it's so easy to tell who they're for.
Well, so I think one of the reasons why this film is so weird is that apparently Simone was intending to just do another horror film,
Mhm.
and then E.T. came out, and it ruined everything, as E.T. did.
Yep.
And so the bigwigs, the money people, were like, no, you got to make a kid-friendly alien movie. You're doing an alien movie, it's got to have a kid in it. And so they hired a kid, and they decided to have a friendly alien along with the evil alien who's killing everybody. And it's just too much. It's just throwing you way back and forth in these different modes. But I get the sense that Simone was not happy with how this film came out, not happy with that decision at all, and kind of gave up on it at some point and sort of put it away, never to be thought of again, until our good friends over at MST3K found it and rediscovered it, thanks to a little intervention from Film Ventures International.
Yes, yeah. And in fact, it's Film Ventures International that released pieces while they were still doing theatrical releases, which I was surprised to find out. That, as I said, is considered to be his magnum opus. It seems to be the most well-remembered of all the Juan Piquer Simón movies, despite Slugs having its moments, as I said.
Right.
And in fact, I found a quote from Edward Montoro of Film Ventures describing the film, in which he essentially described the movie as like he'd said he was stunned. He was sat there in stunned shock when he watched it because it was so gory and so awful. Like the quality of the production was terrible, but they decided to give it a chance and screen it for an audience in San Diego. And while they were all grossed out by the gore parts, every other minute of the movie was a laugh riot. So they knew that it was good to release because it's like, oh, this will entertain people. Look how they're laughing. And that, I believe, is the start of Juan Piquer Simón's relationship with Film Ventures International, which lasted till at least Pod People.
Oh, boy. There is a lot of music in this film. There's some bands, there's some musical numbers and the host segments as well. But mostly there's a really, really interesting soundtrack that quite a lot of hay gets made of by Joel and the Bots. And so I would like to take you, Adam, over to the Scorner this time.
Okay.
Although it's entirely possible that you have things you want to say about the score as well.
Yeah.
But I have lots I want to say. But I want to start with a letter that we got. I want to start with some follow-up. That's not what it's called when you get a letter before you put the episode out.
Follow down.
Follow down, yes. But alert psychic listener Adam Boyce from Tallahassee, Florida, writes in to say, hi, Adam and Chris. For the longest time, I would always wonder where I had heard the music during Pod People's camping scene with the Syntho Birds.
Syntho birds.
Hey, it's a Casio forest.
And about 5 years ago, it dawned on me that it was from Thin Line by Jurassic 5 and Nelly Furtado. Looking through the song credits, it says that it's sampled from Les Fleurs by Minnie Riperton. Pulling that one up, the acoustic guitar is definitely in there, but the synths found in both Pod People and Thin Line are absent, which begs the question, did Jurassic 5 sample directly from Pod People? I might love them all the more if they did. That's a good question. That is a high-quality question.
Absolutely. I gave I watched the episode and I gave that song a listen, and I'm not hearing it personally.
So I heard the bit that they're talking about, I believe, and we'll have links to this in the show notes, and maybe we'll be playing a clip right around now. We'll see.
Can't do justice to these things that I'm feeling.
Oh, hey, Chris from the future here, editing this. Adam and I originally agreed that while the tone quality of the instrument was very, very similar, the melody didn't seem to be the same as we heard in Pod People. But as I was putting those drops in, it's awfully similar if you just transpose it up a few notches. So who knows? Further investigation is required. And if you know anything about this, please feel free to get in touch with us at info@itsjustashow. I will play that little sample again, pitched up 3 semitones, and then we'll go back to our show already in progress.
Can't do justice to these things that I'm feeling.
Yeah, and I guess that brings us to the music proper in the movie.
Yes.
At least as we hear it, because we've got 2 competing names, as usual, since we've mentioned earlier, this is a Film Ventures International release. So, surprise, surprise, the opening and ending credits are from a different movie, and they've been given the Film Ventures treatment in that Carl Michael Demmer is doing the opening and closing credits music. He's even credited in the opening credits.
Yes.
Alongside the actual composer.
Which, let's talk about the actual composer for a bit instead. Librado Pastor. He was a composer and did a lot of work in Spain. I think he's still alive. In fact, when I was trying to find out information on him, I think I found his Facebook page.
Oh,
but
weird.
let's not bother the man.
No. Now, it's funny you mentioned he did a lot of work, because when I was looking at his IMDb page, I noticed that he had 3 other credits, all of which were directed or co-directed by Juan Piquer Simón.
Yes, but he's done a lot of work outside of film scoring. He's done a lot of arranging, I believe, and he's done some work with like bands, like normal, quote unquote, normal bands.
Normal bands.
Because he's got a lot of interest in keyboards, as you may have noticed from this film. And that's the thing that I really want to talk about, because it's an interesting enough soundtrack in many ways. But Joel and the Bots make a lot of jokes about New Age music and about famously music from the hearts of space, or as I say, music from some guys in space. Now, let's talk about New Age music for a bit, or at least the kind of New Age music they're talking about. Do you have any thoughts about it at all going into this?
To be honest, like, as someone who enjoys, I know this is not typically considered New Age music, I don't think, but as someone who enjoys Tangerine Dream, like, depending on like the sound of it, I'm fine with it in theory. It's like, I don't know, I like droney synths. I got no problem with that. It's not something that I actively check out, but I've heard it. Now, I confess, the only John Tesh music, because of course John Tesh was a host of Entertainment Tonight who famously left that gig to pursue his love of New Age music.
And did quite well.
Yeah. He was a success at it. But it's like the only thing I know of John Tesh's music is that he does the NBA on NBC sports theme.
Yes, which is not very typical of his music at all, I believe. But I heard some weird stories about that, but I don't remember it. I think I Googled that up for some other episode that we did. But yes, so there's John Tesh.
Oh, and Yanni.
And Yanni, who is playing piano and such. So you got at something that's very sort of central to a lot of this kind of music, or at least a certain branch of it. So do you know what Music from the Hearts of Space is?
No. I never picked up on the parody. I just kind of enjoyed the presentation of it when I first saw it. It just seemed to be such a perfect parody of NPR.
Well, this is a show that was on NPR. It was syndicated.
Okay.
And it was on NPR starting in 1983. But the show itself started in 1973. It's an hour-long show in which basically there's a little bit of talking at the beginning and a little bit of talking at the end. But then in the middle of it is just the music that's been sort of mixed together, sort of, fading from one to another very smoothly, like a nice DJ set, except it's this kind of space music is what the host Stephen Hill refers to it as. He calls it space music, both because it sounds like outer space, but also because it's trying to encourage your mind to sort of create spaces to inhabit. Right? It's creating these sort of worlds. It's encouraging your brain to trip up in certain ways and to lock into having sort of interior spaces, which is an interesting thing for music to be going for, and is sort of very different from a lot of music that we might have grown up with if you grew up with a more rock type and palette or pop palette. But it is very much related to drone-based musics, and it is related to things like Tangerine Dream. It's coming out of that as well as some jazz stuff, some classical stuff, some experimental stuff. Like, it's a bunch of weird oddball music that's trying to do something that most music isn't trying to do.
Sounds like they'd have a lot of Gil Malay on there.
They could. Yeah, absolutely. And so there is a sort of sense in which it's really oddball. I guess that's where I'm going with this, is that the scene which we call New Age music, the highlights of it are a bunch of real weird people who don't fit in anywhere, but found a place to fit in because, well, they found a market. I mean, New Age, the term, has nothing to do with the music. It has to do with where they sold the music. Because when they started making it in the 70s and sort of coalescing into a scene, they couldn't sell it in record stores. Tower Records started selling New Age music in its own sort of section in the early 80s. I think it was 81 when they started doing that. And, the music had been made for years before that. So they've sold it to bookstores and new age shops where you could buy crystals or whatever. But they would also sell these albums that were doing interesting psychological things that seemed spiritually compatible with some new age beliefs and philosophies.
Gotcha.
If you go to the Wikipedia page for new age music, there is a long section where they basically find every major new age performer and have them talking about why they hate the term new age music and why it doesn't really feel appropriate for them at all. And it's kind of a delightful read. So I went and I listened to an episode of Music from the Hearts of Space with Stephen Hill, who's the announcer guy with the great voice who wishes you on this astral voyage and so forth. And it's a little bit silly, but oh my God, like it was great to just have on there. If you're in the mood for that sort of thing, really good and well curated new age music can absolutely get you into a special zone.
Yeah, this is cool. There's I just looked it up on YouTube, and there is a video that's just listed as Hearts of Space radio program tape from 1984.
That's the one I was listening to.
Yeah. There's 2 hours and 22 minutes of it.
Yeah, I think that's a few episodes chunked together because I believe it's an hour-long show. But and there was a really abrupt break at one point while I was listening. But yeah, I totally recommend just putting it on the background when you're doing something at some point and just letting it creep into your consciousness and seeing where it takes you. Stephen Hill, who eventually started a label called Hearts of Space Records and put out a bunch of different albums and music and so forth, he was asked in this interview, which I'll link to in the show notes, he was asked about whether or not new age music is more spiritual than other music. And basically he's like, I mean, all music is kind of spiritual. And he says, I consider it naive and wishful thinking in the extreme to claim that any music has the capacity to provide spiritual enlightenment. And I'm very skeptical of recordings which make this representation on the jackets, notes, or promotional materials. Nevertheless, he smiles, if even one recording could do this, it would remain a uniquely desirable possibility, and I would pay full retail to experience it. Which I think is exactly the right attitude to have to that stuff.
Yeah.
So how long do you think that radio show Music from the Hearts of Space lasted?
Well, if it was around as early as 1984.
Started in 73.
Started in 73.
Got onto NPR in 83.
And they're parodying it as late as, the early 90s for this particular episode. I'm going to say that it lasted until 97.
Yeah, that's when things started to tank. No, it's still on the air.
What?
Yep, you can still catch it. He's still putting them out. They've had over 1,000 episodes.
Still on NPR?
I think it was on Sirius XM for a while, and then it got complicated.
Okay.
But yes, it's still out there. It's still being put out, which is astonishing. I had no idea that was still happening.
Yeah, I never would have guessed.
It's also true, however, that over the course of the 80s, there got to be a whole industry around it. The Grammys made New Age into a category in 87, and Billboard started keeping charts about it. And eventually in the 90s, there's enough of a market that you get really bad knockoffs and you get pure moods, which we've talked about on a previous episode.
Yeah, music for dorks.
So I think that's the stuff that Joel and the Bots are mostly making fun of on this. Although, in the Amazing Colossal Episode Guide, Kevin says, quote, one additional note. After our Music from Some Guys in Space segment, we were contacted by the actual Music from the Hearts of Space guys, and they thought what we did was keen, and they sent us a bunch of music that we could all drowse off to. Good sports, those guys.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah, they're good. I mean that based on that interview, he sounds like a real mensch.
Yeah, it certainly does.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13 alien eggs for us to smash and get the goopy facts hidden inside. Go, Chris, go!
Pod People was originally released as Los Nuevos Extraterrestres, basically the new ETs. And it was apparently released in some areas as, no joke, E.T. The Second Coming. Oh, parents must have been thrilled.
Pod People comes to Mystery Science Theater 3000, care of Film Ventures International. And you know what that means. The opening and closing credits have been borrowed from another movie. In this case, the footage comes from 1985's Galaxy Invader, a direct-to-video sci-fi action film about a creature who looks like a cross between the creature from the Black Lagoon and Stretch Armstrong's nemesis, Vac-Man.
Galaxy Invader comes courtesy of Baltimore filmmaker Don Dohler, whose specialty was cheap, straight-to-video films about aliens arriving in rural areas and wreaking havoc. You can see these themes at work in such films as Night Beast, The Alien Factor, and Alien Factor 2, Alien Rampage.
And while the opening and closing credits are the closest to an official MST3K take on Galaxy Invader, the film would get riffed by the boys at Riff Tracks in 2011.
Tommy, the Kenny of our film, was played by Oscar Martin, and this is his third and final film. His first film, Beatriz, sounds wild. Juan, played by Oscar, aged 4, is a witness to an assault in the woods. The victim kills a bunch of his attackers to escape and ends up at the boy's house, and his mother's like a countess, and there's a servant who summons Satan, and his mom's body gets taken over by an evil spirit. I have no idea what's going on in that description, but it sounds wild.
Some odd connections. Emilio Linder, who plays our Andy Travis lookalike Brian, later had a bit part in an Italian biopic about Ernest Hemingway called The Legendary Life of Ernest Hemingway. That film starred Joe Pesci as novelist John Dos Passos, and had a role for horror actor Karen Black, who was also in a film adaptation of The Great Gatsby by Hemingway's bromantic partner F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Oh, hey, one more thing about the music in this film. The wacky music that plays during the Trumpy You Can Do Magic Things scene is musique pour rire. I can't say that in French correctly, but that's okay. Music for laughing to, let's say, is what it translates to, by Louis Delacour, Roger, and George Tepperino. Delacour was a music producer in the late 70s in France, and Roger and Tepperino were childhood friends, and Roger in particular became well known for film scores that involved a lot of weird electronic elements. I'll put some links in the show notes. They're pretty cool. Check them out.
As Tommy's mother tucks him into bed, Tom blurts out,
And remember, no wire hangers.
referencing the infamous tantrums of Joan Collins, as played by Faye Dunaway, throwing unhealthy amounts of anger towards her daughter Christina in the infamous melodrama Mommy Dearest. So that's fun.
The episode ends with the sweet, wistful song, Clowns in the Sky. At least until Tom starts doing his Anthony Newley impression.
When the Harlequin is on the bed, and the whiskey haze surrounds his head.
Now, who is Anthony Newley, you may ask? Well, Newley was a successful lyricist, who moviegoers will best remember for providing the earworm lyrics to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and working with John Barry on the title song from Goldfinger.
Of course, Newley was more than just a songwriter, and acted in films ranging from Laurence Olivier's Henry V to the Garbage Pail Kids movie. Believe it or not, the latter was not Newley's greatest misfire. No, that would be his directorial debut, Can Hieronymus Merkin Ever Forget Mercy Hump and Find True Happiness? The X-rated 1969 musical was co-written by and starring Newley as the unfortunately named Hieronymus Merkin, a songwriter preparing a movie about his life. The film was not kindly received by critics or audiences and has largely been forgotten. Have you seen Can Hieronymus Merkin Ever Forget Mercy Hump and Find True Happiness? Write in to info@itsjustashow.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Of the many acronyms Crow lists off during his Robot on the Run monologue in segment 1 is Cpo Sharkey.
The FBI, the NBA, A&P, NBC, ABC, R-Crumb, and Cpo Sharkey, you see, they're all the same.
Sharkey was a sitcom starring Don Rickles as Chief Petty Officer Sharkey, a naval officer in charge of a group of wacky recruits. Now, I think Nick at Night was airing Cpo Sharkey back when Pod People first aired, but I'm sure one of our listeners has the collection of old TV guides that would confirm my hunch.
So, who's that lady that joins Frank and Trace for the recording session of Idiot Control now? If you logically assumed it was Bridget Nelson, you would be wrong, of course. That's makeup lady Faye Burkholder, who also served as a writer on Season 2's Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster and the KTMA riff of Mighty Jack.
And speaking of KTMA, Joel's beige jumpsuit from that era can be seen floating around with the rest of the clothes in the Trumpy You Can Do Magic Things host segment later in the episode. See? Once again proof KTMA is canon.
And that's time!
There's a couple other, let's say, media properties that this film either makes reference to or is redolent of that we might as well bang out 1, 2, 3, do a little quick mini segments on a few of them because they are fun to talk about. And that's why we do this show after all, is to talk about the cool things that come up when you watch an MST3K.
Sure.
So you mentioned earlier that there's a real Pee-wee's Playhouse vibe to this episode in particular.
Yes, yeah, this to me is like kind of like exactly what perfectly captures what I like about the Joel era in its host segments.
Is it because things are flying around the room and there's goofy music playing?
I mean, that's definitely the superficial similarity, but it's just a similar vibe where it's like it's a chill hangout with wacky people, which I think is what I associate with Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Did you grow up with Pee-wee?
Yeah, of course. 86 to 91.
He's a little after my time, so to speak. I didn't really get into Pee-wee until much later on as an adult.
Well, there's no wrong age to get into Pee-wee.
No, indeed.
Have you seen the great Pee-wee's Holiday, the most recent and presumably last Pee-wee Herman movie?
No, you don't mean the Christmas special.
No.
'Cause we watched that together.
Yes, I'm well aware.
I know you're aware, but our audience may not be.
Well, but I'm aware. That's what matters. You were talking to me, not them. But yes, please watch Pee-wee's Holiday. It is all about Pee-wee Herman falling in love with a muscle man.
Oh my.
Yeah, it's well worth watching, and it's got many a tribute to Russ Meyer.
Oh, good.
So it's totally worth watching. But that's the kind of thing that I loved that was even in Pee-wee's Playhouse, which was something that like didn't matter to me at all as a kid, something I paid no attention to, and now something I find extremely charming, which is the love of hunks in Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Yeah,
because there are frequent hunks, and they're just leered on the camera. It's like, hey, who's this shirtless hunk? And people would be like, hi, Ricardo. And that's always pretty funny. But Pee-wee's Playhouse, I think, was a treat for me as a kid because as a child, it had no songs and it had no lessons.
Yes, that's very good.
And I loved that because I hated songs and I hated lessons.
Now, this is an episode of MST3K with a lot of songs in it.
Yes. Well, I turned around a little bit by the time I was 12 years old. But when I was a very, very little child, that was the one thing that would get me to like kind of switch the channel and like maybe go back after the song ended. Like a lot of children's TV had songs in them or characters like imitating, I guess, the recent wave of Disney musicals. But no, Pee-wee's Playhouse never had any cloying music, never had any like really soft moments where like a character has to learn how to deal with their theft or something like that. There's no cloying stuff. There's no learning. It's just what would a kid actually enjoy and what would a kid at heart actually enjoy.
They want Grace Jones if they're going to have music.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why she shows up on the Christmas special.
Or Cher.
Or yes, any number of people like that. But you definitely want that rather than Barney.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, that's Pee-wee's Playhouse. Now, we've talked a few times in this episode about one of the characters looking a lot like Andy Travis, and we have not explained for our younger listeners who the hell we're talking about. So let's enlighten them. Who is Andy Travis?
Well, he's at WKRP in Cincinnati.
Now, we have mentioned Andy Travis on previous episodes, and we've definitely mentioned WKRP, I think, in a recent episode.
Possibly. I forget all of them after they're recorded.
Me too.
Not gonna lie.
But WKRP, but Andy Travis, beloved hero of the show?
Well, he's kind of he's initially the main character, and he gets very quickly replaced by the ensemble.
Yes, because he is incredibly boring.
Yeah, he's, Andy Travis is played by a decent actor whose name escapes me.
Now, what is it? I'm trying to do it without looking it up.
Yeah. See, it's
Frank
hard.
Something? No, that's not right. It's a really boring name, I think, too.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, did you ever watch WKRP in Cincinnati?
I sure did.
Yeah, what'd you think?
Gary Sandy is his name. Good God.
Gary Sandy. That's right. Gary Sandy. See, if you asked me about Jan Smithers, I knew that was Bailey Quarters. If you asked me about Howard Hessman, I knew that was Dr. Johnny Fever. If you asked me about Tim Reed, I knew that was Venus Flytrap. And admittedly, I forget. Gordon Sims is Venus Flytrap's real name.
Yes.
And of course, if you asked me about Frank Bonner, I knew that was Herb Tarlek, chief salesman of WKRP. The other characters I know by heart.
Yes, I watched. Yes, indeed, I did watch WKRP in Cincinnati when I was a kid for a number of reasons. First off, it
Gary
was
Sandy.
popular. Yeah, second off, I loved Gary Sandy's hair. It was just so much of it. I liked it for a number of reasons, but we were a huge fan of the infamous Thanksgiving episode.
Of course.
As everybody rightly should be. But it really was a big sticking point for us around Thanksgiving. We would always make tremendous amounts of reference to it. It was just a real thing in our house.
Yeah, WKRP has got some great episodes. It's definitely a product of its time, and it's got a great cast, and it's got some great memorable characters. There are plenty of aspects in which the show seems kind of dated, in some cases where it's kind of forward thinking. But I think the biggest issue you'll find is that I'd say there's about, I don't know, out of like the run of like 97 episodes or so, there's at least like 10 episodes in which a person implies somebody is gay or pretends to be gay as a punchline.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that like really kind of sours the show.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. So the other thing that you made note of is that at some point there's a character who looks like Leslie Nielsen, who the joke is that he's getting ready for his one-man show, Leslie Nielsen.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a pretty good idea for a one-man show.
Absolutely. I would totally see that right now.
So we have a bit of a Leslie Nielsen thing in our house as well, because we were once playing this board game where you tried to make somebody guess the name of a celebrity, using clues and such. And we were playing it with my stepfather, and he didn't know who we were talking about. He didn't know who Leslie Nielsen was. So I had to break it down for him, like syllable by syllable. And he got all the syllables. I told him something for Les, and I told him something for Lee, and I got him to say, Neil, and I got him to say son. I got him to say each part. And then finally, after like spending all this time getting him to say each syllable, I said, okay, put them all together. And he said, Lelis Nelson. So he's known as Lelis Nelson in my house.
Oh, fair enough. He's been called worse things.
I'm sure he has. Leslie Nielsen, of course, star of Police Squad and the Naked Gun movies and some other films.
Yes, I mean, he's absolutely terrific. If you're looking for a serious Leslie Nielsen performance, be sure to check him out in Forbidden Planet, in which he is terrific.
Oh, that's right. I just saw that. I forgot that was him.
Yeah, because again, you're not used to him seeing pratfalls from a local O.J. Simpson on screen.
Exactly.
But no, he's an actor who had like a fair bit of range, and like it was always fun seeing him and stuff. Like he's in an old Columbo episode with Patrick McGowan, and he's in tons of TV, and he's of course in the horror movie Creepshow, in which he buries Ted Danson up to his neck in sand and just waits for the tide to drown him.
But none of this matters because he was in Police Squad.
Yes, Police Squad, one of the greatest shows of all time.
There is something really impressive and amazing about a comedy show that lasts for 6 episodes.
And it is so influential.
And it's perfect. Maybe you want more in part of your brain, but you know that is just right. Garth Marenghi pulled it off. Fawlty Towers went on for 2 seasons, probably shouldn't have. Has 12 episodes, that's no good. But I can't think if there's any others off the top of my head. But just Police Squad and Garth Marenghi both stand out as these little gems of shows.
Yeah, well, that's just it. If only MST3K were 6 episodes, hell, we'd be done by now. All right. Well, I think that covers everything we want to say about Los Nuevos Extraterrestres, or whatever
Close
it was. I think I slipped a little French in there. But Chris, do you have, by any chance, a final factoid about pod people?
I have a little tiny factoid. It's not really a factoid. I mean, it's not even that much, but I feel like we do need to point it out, which is that this is a movie that is very unfortunately influenced by E.T.
Sure.
And this episode came out a long time ago. It came out in the early 90s. And there's a reference at some point in it when, towards the end, some magical thing happens. I don't even remember what. But Crow says,
Hey, it's like that scene in Mac and Me when Mac came back to life.
Yeah.
and we would be remiss not to point to the Mac and Me episode that they would do many years later in the Netflix era of the show, which we talked about a good long time ago.
And you know what? That's the amazing thing is that, just when you think you've hit rock bottom, Mac and Me does make pod people look like E.T. I meant the other way around.
Okay, that makes more sense. So yeah, I don't know. It's fun because, of course, Mac and Me would have just come out a year or so ago, I guess, when this episode came out. And how would they know that they'd be able to get the rights to a McDonald's movie eventually? If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you can answer any of the many, many questions we raised today, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our website is itsjustashow.com, and we're on Twitter at itisjustashow. We'd love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners just like you. Yes, you. For as little as $1 an episode, you can help us research and record this show. And you can listen to all of our superfan bonus bits. You can find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/79. All right. Well, we've done another E.T. knockoff. I'm ready to switch it up genre-wise. Maybe a biker film. Maybe a big rubber-suited monster. Well, no, we've got a big rubber-suited monster already. Maybe a sex romp. I don't know. You got that? You got a sex romp?
Yeah, I got something sexy for you, and it's definitely a romp, because what could be sexier than the presence of Christopher Lee, an actor who worked with Donald Pleasance, so we'll have him as the guest of honor for our Donald Pleasance Day recording, as we look at episode 323, Castle of Fu Manchu.
Sex Romer's Castle of Fu Manchu.
Yeah, it's a sex romp.
This was the Castle of Fu Manchu was the final episode of the season 2 to season 7 era that I was able to get on videotape when I was taping them off the screen. It took forever for this one to come up, and if the few times it did show up in rotation, something would go wrong with my VCR and I wouldn't actually snag it. It was incredibly frustrating, but then one day I got it, and I'm not actually sure that they ever showed it again after that.
Okay, well, now you can watch it with fresh eyes.
But what I'm saying is this is an episode that I'm super not that familiar with, considering it's a season 3 episode.
I'm not even sure if I've seen this one, to be honest.
Oh, it's got Christopher Lee in it, I'm told.
Yeah. It's got Christopher Lee.
All right. Well, until then...
I do not want Los Nuevos Extraterrestres or Los Huevos Rancheros.
Trumpy, you can do stupid things. Take it away, Theme Squad.
Ricardo.